I learned early that silence could be mistaken for guilt. That morning, the hallway smelled like floor cleaner and wet paper, the kind of sharp scent that clung to your clothes and followed you into class. My fingers were cold as I held the paper against my chest, the edges already soft from how tightly I'd been gripping it. Around me, lockers slammed shut, sneakers squeaked against the tile, and voices bounced off the walls, laughing, complaining, alive. None of them sounded like mine. I was 11 years old, standing outside room 214, waiting for my teacher to finish speaking with the principal. The paper in my hands wasn't just a test. It felt heavier than that, like proof or maybe a verdict. Students passed me in small groups. Some slowed down when they noticed me standing there alone. Some whispered. Some didn't bother to hide their looks at all. I was the only black kid in the advanced math program. That mattered more than anyone ever admitted. Mrs. Whitman's voice floated through the cracked classroom door, tight, controlled, the kind of voice adults use when they've already decided something. "I've been teaching for 20 years, she said. I know when something doesn't add up. The principal murmured something I couldn't hear. I stared at the floor, at the tiny crack in the tile shaped like a lightning bolt. My heart thudded so hard I was sure someone could hear it. I replayed the test in my head for the 100th time, the questions, the formulas. The answers I double-checked because I was afraid of being wrong, not because I didn't know the material, but because I knew what would happen if I surprised them. The door opened. Mrs. Whitman stepped out first. She didn't look angry, that was worse. Her expression was calm, almost disappointed, like I'd let her down in a way she'd expected all along. "Come with me," she said. The principal avoided my eyes. We walked back into the classroom together. The room went quiet the second I entered. 23 students sat frozen at their desks, pencils paused mid-air. Some looked curious, some looked uncomfortable. A few looked relieved that whatever was happening wasn't happening to them. I walked to the front of the room, every step loud in my ears. Mrs. Whitman held up my test, a red 100% circled at the top. "You scored the highest in the class," she said. A ripple moved through the room, whispered disbelief. Someone muttered, "No way." She tilted her head slightly and looked at me over her glasses. "And that's exactly the problem." My stomach dropped. "This test was significantly more difficult than the last," she continued. "Several top students struggled." She gestured vaguely toward the front row. "And yet you answered every question correctly." The way she said you made it feel like an accusation. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. My throat felt tight, like words were getting stuck before they could come out. Mrs. Whitman sighed. "I need you to be honest with me." "I am," I whispered. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Did you receive help on this test?" The room felt smaller, the walls closer. "No, ma'am." "Did someone give you the answers?" "No." Her eyes flicked to the paper, then back to me. "Did you use your phone?" I shook my head. My hands were trembling now. I pressed them together to hide it. A boy in the second row laughed quietly. Someone else snorted. Mrs. Whitman didn't stop them. "You understand," she said, lowering her voice, "that cheating is a serious offense." The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. "I didn't cheat," I said, louder this time. My voice cracked anyway. She turned to the class. "We work hard here, integrity matters, and when someone's performance suddenly changes, questions have to be asked." Suddenly, as if I hadn't been studying every night at the kitchen table while my mom worked late shifts. As if I hadn't spent weekends solving problems because numbers were the only place where things made sense. She handed the test to the principal, who stood awkwardly near the door. "We'll be reviewing your scores," Mrs. Whitman said. "Until then, this test is invalid." Invalid. The whispers grew louder. I felt eyes drilling into my back, into my skin, into every place I already felt exposed. "Go wait in the hallway," she added. "We'll talk later." I walked out, my legs stiff, my face burning. The door closed behind me, cutting off the room, but not the sound. I could still hear them talking about me. In the hallway, I slid down against the lockers until I was sitting on the floor. I pressed the paper to my chest again, even though it didn't count anymore. My eyes stung, but I refused to cry. Crying would only make it easier for them. That's when I noticed the other teacher standing near the end of the hall, a man I didn't recognize. He wasn't watching his phone. He wasn't walking past. He was watching me. Our eyes met. He didn't look away. There was something in his expression I hadn't seen all day, concern and something else, curiosity. At the time, I didn't know why that mattered. I didn't know that the scores Mrs. Whitman dismissed so easily were already being processed. That data was moving through systems she couldn't control. That numbers, real numbers, were about to speak louder than suspicion ever could. All I knew was this: they thought they'd caught me. And I was about to learn how dangerous it is when people mistake brilliance for a lie. The accusation didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, the way poison does when it's mixed into something you trust. I remember the exact moment I felt the room change. It was the Monday after the exams, the hallway buzzing with the low hum of lockers slamming and shoes squeaking against the floor. I was holding my test paper folded carefully in my hands, not because I was proud, but because I was scared someone might grab it. The number written in red ink at the top still didn't feel real, 98%. I'd stared at it for so long my eyes hurt. I didn't tell anyone, not my friends, not even my mom yet. I needed time to understand how something that good could belong to me. I was walking toward my classroom when I heard my name. Marcus. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry, it was calm, controlled, and somehow worse because of it. Ms. Harlan stood near the doorway of the staff office, her arms crossed, her clipboard tucked against her side like a shield. She had the kind of posture that made you straighten without realizing you'd de-slouched. "Yes, ma'am," I said. She looked at the paper in my hand, then back at my face. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Come with me for a moment." Students walked past us, whispering, laughing, living their normal lives. I followed her into the office, my heart beating faster with every step. The door closed behind us with a soft click. "Have a seat," she said. I sat. She didn't. She leaned against the desk instead, flipping through a stack of papers slowly, deliberately. The sound of paper scraping paper filled the silence. "Marcus," she said finally, "your test score was impressive." "Thank you," I said, barely above a whisper. She tilted her head slightly. "That's just it." My stomach dropped. "This score," she continued, "is significantly higher than your previous assessments." I nodded. "I studied a lot." She smiled again, tight, measured. "You expect me to believe that you went from average to nearly perfect on your own?" The words landed heavy. I've been practicing," I said. "My mom helps me." Her eyes flicked up at that. Something unreadable passed over her face. "Your mother?" she repeated. "Yes, ma'am. She quizzes me. We go over." She raised a hand, stopping me. "I've been teaching for 23 years," she said. "I know when something doesn't add up." The room felt smaller, the walls closer. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my effort to keep it steady. She didn't answer immediately. She walked to the printer, picked up another copy of my test, and placed it on the desk between us. "Do you recognize these answers?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "They're mine." She tapped the paper. "They match the answer key exactly, including the phrasing." "I studied the book," I said. "I memorized." "Marcus," she interrupted gently, "children don't just memorize advanced material like this without help." I stared at her. "I did," I said. Her eyes hardened just a little. "Did anyone assist you during the exam?" "No." "Did you use notes?" "No." "Did you look at another student's paper?" "No." Each answer felt like stepping onto thinner ice. She sighed and straightened as if she'd reached a conclusion already. "I'm going to have to report this," she said. The words didn't make sense at first. "Report what?" I asked. "An irregularity," she said. "Possible academic dishonesty." Dishonesty, cheating, the word echoed in my head loud and unreal. "I didn't cheat," I said quickly. "I swear." She looked at me the way adults look at children when they've already decided the truth. "We'll see," she said. "For now you'll remain in class, but the score will be withheld pending review." My throat tightened. "Can I call my mom?" "That won't be necessary yet," she replied. "Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be." Too late. By the time I walked back into the hallway, it already felt big. People were looking at me differently, not openly, not obviously, but the whispers had started, carried on glances and half-finished sentences. "That's him." I heard. "No way." He in class. The desk beside me stayed empty longer than usual. When someone finally sat down, they didn't look at me. Ms. Harlan taught the lesson like nothing had happened. She wrote on the board, asked questions, smiled at the students who raised their hands confidently. Every so often her eyes drifted to me, not angry, suspicious. At lunch I sat alone. My friend Jamal started to walk toward me, then hesitated when two other kids leaned in and said something I couldn't hear. He gave me an apologetic look and turned away. I pushed my food around my tray, appetite gone. I kept thinking if I explain it right, they'll understand. If they listen, they'll see. But no one asked me anything. They just decided. After school, I waited in the hallway for my mom. She worked late most days, but she always came when she could. I sat on the bench near the trophy case, staring at plaques that listed names I'd never see anyone like mine on. Ms. Harlan walked past me, then stopped. "Your mother will be contacted," she said. "Until then, don't discuss this with other students." I nodded. When my mom arrived, she took one look at my face and knew. "What happened?" she asked softly. I tried to speak, the words tangled in my throat. "They think I cheated," I finally said. Her hand tightened around mine. "Who?" she asked. "The teacher." Her jaw set, calm but dangerous in the way only a parent's quiet anger can be. We went home in silence. That night I sat at the kitchen table while my mom reread my old notebooks, my practice sheets, the flashcards we'd made together. She didn't doubt me for a second. "They're wrong," she said firmly, "and we're going to prove it." But school doesn't wait for proof. The next day I was pulled out of class and sent to the counselor's office, then the principal's, then back to class with eyes following me like I'd done something unforgivable. By the end of the week, the rumor had a shape. Marcus cheated, not maybe. Not there checking. Cheated. I heard it whispered in the bathroom, saw it written lightly in pencil on the corner of a desk. Felt it when teachers watched me too closely during quizzes, when classmates guarded their papers like I was contagious. I stopped raising my hand, stopped smiling, stopped believing that doing well was enough. What hurt most wasn't the accusation, it was how easily they believed it. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet, terrifying question started to form. What if the truth didn't matter at all? I didn't know it yet, but the answer to that question was coming. And when it did, it would change everything. By the time the meeting was scheduled, everyone already knew the outcome. That was the worst part. The email went out on a Thursday afternoon, copied to my mother, the principal, the counselor, and two teachers I barely knew. The subject line was clean and professional: academic integrity review, no emotion, no room for doubt. I watched my mom read it on her phone while standing at the sink, her back straight, her shoulders tense. She didn't say anything at first. Just inhaled slowly, like she was preparing herself to walk into a storm she'd seen coming her whole life. "They want us there tomorrow morning," she said finally. "Before school." I nodded. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Miss Harlan's face, the polite smile, the certainty behind it. I replayed the test in my mind again and again, every question, every answer. I wondered if there was something I'd done wrong without realizing it. Some rule I didn't know existed for kids like me. Morning came too fast. The conference room was cold even though it was late spring. A long table sat in the center, polished to a shine that reflected the overhead lights. My chair felt too big, my feet didn't reach the floor properly. Ms. Harlan was already there, so was the principal and the counselor, 3 adults, 1 child. They spoke to my mother like I wasn't in the room. "We noticed a pattern," the principal said, folding his hands. "A sudden academic jump. Which can be concerning, the counselor added gently, like she was offering sympathy instead of suspicion. My mother leaned forward. Or it can mean he worked hard. Ms. Harlan smiled politely. We encourage growth, she said, but we also protect standards. Standards, I stared at the table. We reviewed the exam, the principal continued. The responses matched the official answer key too closely. I studied the key from the practice book, I said quietly. Ms. Harlan looked at me. Marcus, this is a serious conversation. Let the adults speak. My mother's head snapped toward her. He's speaking. There was a pause. We're not accusing anyone, the counselor said quickly. This is just an inquiry. Then why does it feel like a verdict? My mother asked. No one answered that. They asked me questions again, the same ones: who helped me, how long I studied, where I sat, who sat near me, whether I remembered looking up during the test. Every answer I gave seemed to make them more convinced of my guilt. Finally, the principal cleared his throat. Until this is resolved, he said, the score will be invalidated. My chest tightened. What does that mean? I asked. It means, he replied, that the exam will not count. My mother stood up. So he's being punished, she said, without proof. This is temporary, the counselor insisted. Temporary damage still damages, my mother said. They didn't argue because they didn't need to. The school had already decided. When I walked into class afterward, my desk had been moved. It wasn't dramatic, just a few inches back, closer to the teacher's desk, closer to her eyes. The message was clear: we're watching you. I felt it in every lesson, every quiz, every glance. When someone whispered, the sound seemed louder. When someone laughed, I wondered if it was about me. At recess, kids stopped asking me for help with homework. At lunch, my name carried a weight it hadn't before. You think he really cheated? I heard his mom probably did the test for him. My dad says those programs just give answers to scholarship kids. I stopped defending myself because explaining felt like begging. And begging felt worse than being silent. At home, my mother kept pushing. She emailed the district, requested records, asked for exam proctoring footage, asked for comparisons with other students' scores. Days passed, then weeks. Nothing changed. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. A substitute teacher came in during history class. Ms. Harlan was out. No explanation. The substitute passed back our quizzes. When she reached my desk, she paused. This is excellent work, she said, loud enough for others to hear. A few heads turned. I froze. Thank you, I whispered. She smiled and moved on. It was a small thing, almost nothing. But it reminded me of something I'd started to forget. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't a fraud. I wasn't lucky. I was prepared. That afternoon, my mom got a call, not from the school, from the district office. There's been a request, the voice said, for a comprehensive review of the testing data. My mom asked who made it. There was a pause. An external evaluator, the voice said, someone with oversight authority. She hung up slowly. For the first time in weeks, she smiled, not relief, recognition. They didn't expect someone to look deeper, she said, but someone is. I didn't understand what that meant yet. I just knew something had shifted. The school didn't announce anything, but teachers started acting different. Whispers changed tone. Ms. Harlan avoided looking at me when she returned, and in the back of my mind, a quiet certainty began to grow. The truth hadn't disappeared. It was gathering, and when it finally surfaced, it wouldn't just clear my name. It would expose everything they tried to bury. The review didn't start with an announcement. It started with silence. No emails, no meetings, no apologies, just a subtle change in the air, like a room where someone has opened a window but hasn't said why. Teachers stopped calling on me suddenly, then overcorrected by calling on me too much. The counselor smiled in the hallway, the kind of smile people use when they're trying to look calm but aren't. The principal avoided my mother entirely, ducking into offices when he saw her coming. And Ms. Harlan, she stopped teaching the way she used to. Her lessons became rigid, scripted. She stuck to the book so closely it felt like she was afraid to say the wrong thing. When she graded, she double-checked everything, red pen hovering like it didn't trust itself anymore. I noticed because I was watching now. Before I just wanted to disappear, now I wanted to understand. One afternoon, a man I'd never seen before walked into our classroom. He wasn't dressed like a teacher. No tie, no staff badge. Just a dark blazer and a tablet tucked under his arm. Ms. Harlan stiffened the moment she saw him. Class, she said quickly, work silently. The man smiled at us, then leaned down and whispered something to her. Her face went pale. I'll be right back, she said, voice tight. They stepped into the hallway. The door didn't close all the way. I wasn't trying to listen. But when your name is spoken, it pulls your attention whether you want it to or not. Statistical inconsistency, the man said. I followed protocol, Ms. Harlan replied. Pattern of assumptions, he continued. Her voice dropped. You're making this about race. There was a pause. No, the man said calmly. You already did. The door closed. No one spoke for the rest of the period. At home that night, my mother finally told me what she'd been holding back. The district hadn't just agreed to review my test. They'd agreed to review every test Ms. Harlan had flagged in the past 5 years. Especially the ones flagged for irregular improvement. Especially the ones from students who look like me. They pulled the data, my mother said, scrolling through an email. Scores, seating charts, proctor notes, even handwriting analysis. I swallowed. What if they still say I cheated? My mother looked at me for a long moment. They can say whatever they want, she said, but numbers don't lie and patterns don't either. The next week, a formal hearing was scheduled, not with me, with the school. Wasn't allowed to attend, but my mother was. She came home that evening quieter than usual. How was it? I asked. She set her bag down slowly. They tried to justify it, she said. They talked about intuition, professional judgment, experience. She laughed once without humor. One man actually said, sometimes you just know when something doesn't add up. And I asked. And then the evaluator put the charts on the screen. She described it like a scene from a movie. Rows of Names removed, just numbers and timelines, scores rising gradually, except when they didn't. White students showed jumps, big ones, no flags. Students of color showed the same jumps, flags everywhere. What happened then? I asked. My mother's voice softened. The room got very quiet. The school asked for time, time to review internally, time to reconsider procedures, time to clarify intentions, time they hadn't given me. At school, rumors started spreading, but not about me anymore. People whispered about investigations, about complaints, about lawsuits. Ms. Harlan took a sick day, then another, then another. When she finally returned, she didn't look at me at all, but the biggest moment came on a Friday afternoon. I was called into the office. So was my mother. The principal sat behind his desk, hands folded, eyes tired. There has been a determination, he said. My heart pounded. Based on the findings, he continued, the invalidation of Marcus's exam was premature, not wrong, not unjust, just inconveniently early. The score will be reinstated, he said, with full credit. I waited for more, an apology, an acknowledgement, anything. It didn't come. My mother stood. And the accusation, she asked, the damage, the principal shifted. We'll be reviewing staff training protocols, he said carefully. My mother nodded. That's not what I asked. Silence. We left, but something followed us out of that office, not victory. Not closure, momentum, because reinstating my score fixed one thing, but the evidence they'd uncovered was bigger than me. And once truth is seen clearly, it doesn't quietly go back into hiding. It demands consequences, and they were coming. The announcement didn't come to the students first. It came to the parents. An email sent late on a Tuesday night, the kind schools send when they hope people will sleep on it and calm down by morning. My mother didn't sleep. She read it aloud to me at the kitchen table, her voice steady but tight. Following an internal and external review, the district has identified serious inconsistencies in assessment procedures. I stopped her. They're saying it like it's a mistake, she nodded. That's how institutions apologize when they're afraid. By morning, the email was everywhere. Parents were talking in the parking lot. Teachers whispered in hallways. Someone leaked part of the report to a local education blog, and by lunch, people were using words the school had carefully avoided. Bias, discrimination, pattern targeting. For the first time since the accusation, people looked at me differently, not suspicious, not curious, careful, like they were realizing I'd been carrying something heavy while they'd walked past without noticing. Ms. Harlan didn't come back after that Tuesday. Her substitute never mentioned her name. Her desk stayed exactly the same, papers stacked neatly, pens aligned, a framed quote about academic integrity still propped against the wall. No one touched it. It felt like a ghost was sitting there. Then the district scheduled a board meeting, open to the public. My mother hesitated when she told me. They want students present, she said. You don't have to go. I want to, I replied. The room was packed. Parents stood along the walls. Reporters sat in the back, phones ready. The board members looked nervous, shuffling papers they already knew by heart. When my name was called, my chest tightened, not to accuse me, to clear me. They summarized the findings in neutral language, but the meaning landed anyway. Out of 27 students whose tests had been invalidated over 5 years, 22 were Black or Latino. Several had identical improvement curves to white students whose scores were accepted without question. In multiple cases, the only written justification was a variation of the same phrase, did not seem consistent with prior ability. A board member cleared his throat. Marcus Williams' case brought this to light, he said, brought this to light like I'd stumbled into it by accident. My mother stood when they invited comments. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't cry, she just spoke clearly. You didn't just doubt a score, she said, you doubted a child. You taught him that excellence would always need to be defended if it came from the wrong face. The room was silent. One board member asked if I wanted to say anything. I hadn't planned to, but I stood anyway. When I was accused, I said, hands shaking, no one asked me how I studied, no one asked what I changed, no one asked why I wanted that score. I looked around the room. You decided before you questioned. A reporter lowered her phone. The meeting ended without applause. But it didn't end the story. 2 days later, Ms. Harlan resigned. The district announced mandatory bias training, an independent audit was ordered, and quietly families started coming forward. Students who'd given up on honors classes, kids who'd stopped trying after being told their success was suspicious, parents who'd accepted explanations because fighting felt exhausting. I realized then that what happened to me wasn't rare, it was just finally seen. At school, a teacher stopped me after class. I owe you an apology, she said. I should have spoken up sooner. I nodded. I didn't know what else to do with that. The hardest moment came when Ms. Harlan emailed my mother, not me. Her message was long, carefully worded. She said she never intended harm, that she'd been trained to look for irregularities, that she was sorry if I felt hurt. If my mother didn't respond, neither did I, because by then something had shifted. I wasn't trying to be believed anymore. I already was, and the people who needed forgiveness hadn't yet learned how to tell the truth without protecting themselves. The district scheduled one final assembly. They said it was about moving forward. I knew better. When institutions say that, it's because they've realized the past won't stay quiet. And the final piece of evidence, the one that changed everything, hadn't been shared yet, but it would be. And when it was, no one would be able to laugh, dismiss, or explain it away. Not anymore. The day of the final assembly, the auditorium was packed. Parents, students, and faculty filled every seat, their whispers bouncing off the polished walls. There was tension in the air, the kind that makes your chest tight and your stomach knot in anticipation. I sat in the front row, my mother beside me, her hand resting lightly on mine. She didn't squeeze it, didn't speak. She just gave me a look that said, "You've carried this far, now finish it." The principal stepped up to the podium. His voice was calm, rehearsed, but strained underneath. Today, we acknowledge the findings of the district audit and take steps to ensure fairness moving forward. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. We also have a student who played a crucial role in uncovering discrepancies in grading practices. I felt every eye in the room turn to me. My heart pounded. This was the moment I had been dreading and anticipating simultaneously. A large screen behind the podium flickered to life, displaying the evidence, charts, graphs, and tables showing score discrepancies over years. Names of students, including mine, highlighted patterns of unfair invalidation. The words bias in assessment flashed clearly. Parents gasped. Teachers shuffled in their seats. Some faces went pale, some mouths hung open. Then the principal said my name. Marcus Williams, please come forward and speak. I rose. Every step toward the podium felt heavy, but I kept moving. I didn't look at Ms. Harlan. She wasn't there, but I could see the shock on the faces of teachers who had doubted me. I cleared my throat. When I was accused of cheating, I began, voice steady. I wasn't given the chance to explain. My answers, my effort, my preparation, it didn't matter. What mattered was how I looked, the assumptions made before I spoke. I took a breath, letting the room absorb each word. But evidence doesn't lie, facts don't care about assumptions, and the truth, no matter how uncomfortable, demands to be seen. I gestured to the screen behind me. This report isn't just about me, it's about every student whose work was questioned unfairly. It's about every teacher who ignored potential because of bias. It's about creating a system where diligence is recognized regardless of the color of your skin, the neighborhood you come from, or who your parents are. The room was silent, even the air seemed to hold its breath. A parent whispered, finally another nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. The principal swallowed, then nodded at me. Thank you, Marcus, your courage has made a difference. I stepped down from the podium, my legs trembling, my heart racing not from fear but from release. The weight I had carried for months, for years, was lifting. After the assembly, students approached me. Some said nothing, just looked at me differently. Some thanked me quietly. Even Evan, the boy who had once whispered in class about grades, offered a small nod of respect. Outside, my mother hugged me. You didn't just speak for yourself, she whispered. You spoke for everyone who couldn't. The news spread. Local papers and blogs covered the story. Student exposes bias in grading, one headline read. Interviews, social media posts, and community discussions followed. Ms. Harlan resigned quietly, no fanfare, her presence erased by accountability. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. The humiliation I had felt, the doubt cast upon me, the isolation, it wasn't wasted. It had prepared me to stand here, to speak clearly and forcefully when it mattered most. Years later, I would remember the laughter, the whispers, the doubt. But I would also remember the faces in the auditorium that day, the way people leaned in when the truth was laid bare. And I would remember that courage is contagious, that speaking truth in the face of injustice can ripple far beyond the room, beyond the school, beyond the fear. I had survived the humiliation, I had survived the doubt, and more than that, I had transformed it into power, because sometimes the world laughs at you, sometimes it doubts you, sometimes it dismisses your voice. But when evidence speaks and courage follows, even the loudest laughter fades, and in that silence justice finally speaks.